Welcome back to GaleForceWins Season 3.
GaleForceWins podcast is proudly sponsored by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association. The NLCA provides unparalleled opportunities for its members through industry education, construction information, government advocacy, and networking events. The NLCA is building Newfoundland and Labrador. For more information, visit nlca.ca.
All right, welcome back to another great edition of GaleForceWins, and I can tell you there is a lot of interesting things happening in and around Placentia and at the Port of Argentia. I'm Alan Dale. With me, as always, my good buddy Jerry Crew. How you making out, Jerry?
Well, I'm doing phenomenal because we're in Argentia, and I'm actually looking out the window, and I'm staring right at the port. Am I? Aren't I, Scott?
You absolutely are.
What a
beautiful
spot.
day.
I got a better seat than you do, Alan.
No, that's fine. I'm looking at you fellas.
He's looking at me.
Right? Yeah. Scott, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I will, absolutely. Hi, I'm Scott Penney. I'm the CEO at the Port of Argentia, and I've been here for just over 2 years. Been around a bit, had some time in the telecommunications industry, was also on the Hebron project for a number of years, spent some time with Pennecon, and now with the Port of Argentia. And so very diverse background, but at the end of the day, it was all business. It was always about financials, understanding projects, execution, and looking for opportunities.
Well, you found an opportunity here for sure. There seems to be a lot of projects on the move here and a lot of great opportunity. Situate us where we are in Argentia. How does that fit into the ecosystem here, and why is it so important?
Well, historically, I mean, the port has been here now for over 70 years. And I always say that, you know, the Americans, when they were looking for a location, they were looking for what I always termed the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they came here, and this really is the spot. I mean, we're ice-free harbor, deep water port. Basically, there was a community here. And so, you know, this really was the epicenter to this area, and it drove a lot of, you know, economic development. You know, I've heard numbers. I remember Ann Whalen gave a presentation at our recent PBIS in October that I think was around 1960. The census data showed there was 50,000 plus living in this area. Wow. So when you think about that, I mean, has always been a critical element. And then over the few years, you know, maybe the last 15, 20 years, there wasn't as much activity. You know, kudos to the ongoing boards of directors that have been here and the former employees. They kept the place going, looking for opportunities, and did very well. Kept the place going and made it, you know, relevant. And kept it relevant, and I think that's evident by their ability to sign and secure the West White Rose project. And now we're at a point where the evolution is changing, and the demand for deep water ports that are ice-free, heavy laydown areas, that demand is, to be honest with you, has really become unprecedented.
Yeah.
Because offshore oil and gas was not a requirement for that heavy laydown, because it was always subsea. You know, could always, you know, it didn't have that magnitude.
Right.
But we're talking now massive structures and things of that nature, whatever it may be in whatever industry, is really what makes the port relevant today. And it's you're right. It's very exciting to be a part of a team that is leading that charge for the province. And as you mentioned, the Premier was here a couple of weeks ago. And I can tell you it was a privilege to show him around and show him what we've done with the place in terms of developing economic activity and spin-offs. And I remember, you know, we had a conversation, we talked about, it's like when you're an entrepreneur and you hit the U.S. market, your product, you're selling it to the U.S. You know then that you've found a niche, and you're going to be you got a lot of opportunity and runway ahead of you, and that's what I liken it to. It's like an entrepreneur. You go out, you search, you dig and find an opportunity, and it's big because you get the U.S. market.
Right. And the opportunity, interestingly enough, has always been here. Geographically, it was right here. They saw it, many, many years ago when the Americans came and looked at it, right?
Well, that's what's so ironic.
Yeah.
I often say, it's funny that, now we're an integral part of the U.S. We're an integral part of the oil and gas. And that's not by fluke.
Right.
Right? Over the years, the board members, the employees, they've gone to all the events. They kept the place on the radar.
Yeah.
And West White Rose was a start to that. And that got going. And then you get into COVID and everything dies down, then it shuts down. But everybody kept trudging and trudging along. So it'll always be relevant in Argentia. And some people say, well, that's not the center of the, St. John's and all those areas and other ports. Well, it is. Yeah. And it is because if the Americans thought that the other locations were suitable and gave them what they needed, they probably would have established there.
Right.
And you cannot lose the sight of the land mass. You can't lose sight of its ice-free, deep water. Those are critical elements in this business. And fortunately, we're able to take an investment, I would say back in the day, was probably billions of dollars to make this area and landmass what it is today. And ironically, my grandfather worked here. To be back here, it's pretty surreal and exciting. There's no question. And we've got a great team around us. We continue to make it relevant. We continue to promote it. And knowing that there's a real keen interest from the federal government's perspective, from the provincial government perspective, from the local area and Mayor Pearson and his council, it really is rewarding.
How many ports would exist like this globally with ice-free, deep water and a huge laydown area, geographically placed so close to so many markets? How many are there?
There are lots.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no question there are lots. The issue is what I talked about earlier, is the size and magnitude of some of these structures that are being used now in offshore wind development. And so when you factor in that, it doesn't take long to eat up 70 hectares.
No.
So our runways are 70 hectares. So there are a lot of large ports worldwide, no question.
Right.
But they've had a niche market and they're doing their own thing, whether it be containers and cranes. I was in the Port of Atlanta with the Premier back last June and did a tour. I can't remember the thousands and thousands of acres that they had. But that was a containerized port. That was a container shipping port. Mm-hmm. So they can take
that's kind of
elements, right?
Yeah,
so for us, there's not a lot. I know that right now we're the only port on the eastern seaboard that can do what we're going to be able to do.
The monopiles.
The
weight.
Yeah, just the weight and the sheer size of them. But we also got a $14 billion plus mega project being built there as well down at West White Rose. Mm-hmm. You've got a runway where we're going to be able to position ourselves very strongly to be the potential site for Equinor's Bay du Nord spool base. Wow. So when you so back to your question around what other ports, I don't know of many.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's the whole infrastructure. The land was created in a way. It was all flat land. We've had many proponents, from politicians to industry to developers to consultants that come here, and I can tell you their jaw drops with, wow.
It's funny, you think about Newfoundland historically, Alan, as being remote. What you're describing, when the people look at us, we're not remote. We're close to the eastern seaboard, right?
Well, our dock is closer to Europe than it is to Vancouver. Right? So, our ability to bring the monopiles or whatever it may be, anything in relation to Bay du Nord, or, we had a crane shipped here for Hibernia replacement. That came here, and Argentia freezers handle that. Major scope of work, months of work. And so we're not far, right? And distance is only measured in relative terms to your project.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And we know that the Port of Argentia is not the closest port for the U.S. offshore wind market. Mm-hmm. We're not bad, but there is other locations that are closer, but they just do not have the land mass, the ground bearing capacity, and basically the capital to invest to do what we've done. Yeah. Right. Fortunately, we had the American government do it for us some 70 years ago.
Right.
And we're still living on it. So it's a great investment.
And kudos to the people that throughout the past 70 years that kept Argentia relevant.
Right.
Kept us in the conversation. can you imagine, 30, 40 years ago, those folks going into a boardroom somewhere trying to convince somebody the need to be at a trade show to talk about what we could potentially offer?
Right.
Kudos to them for staying on it, right?
They've, our board, our former staff members that are retired or moved on, and our current staff. I mean, they were always relevant. Every time I went to a show with another entity, they were always there. And they were always talking, pressing the flesh, trying to make sure that this place stayed relevant. And even for me, when the opportunity came up, I always believed that Argentia had a different ability to be a real strategic advantage.
Yeah.
Not only for the port, but for the province, for new industry. When I came here, there was no line of sight to windmills and offshore energy.
Amazing.
There was no line of sight to hydrogen. It was a West White Rose project that I saw that there was a huge potential out there for industry.
Yeah.
And how we promoted that, and like I said before, I mean, our team is very small, but we really focused in on, what was our big benefit? What was our big attributes? What's our difference? What do we have that's different? And you got a runway, and you've got, hectares of land, thousands of hectares of land that you can put a wind farm on.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, that's not me coming with that idea. But those things, as you continue over the years, the relevancy, keeping us relevant, brings all that to the forefront.
Yeah.
And that's what's so exciting for us, because we're not just talking a storage yard. We're talking a hydrogen facility and an electrolyzer plant with our own wind turbines. So there's going to be turbines coming to go to the U.S. There's going to be turbines coming to come into Argentia to be erected.
So many people will get that confused, right? They don't understand, okay, what are these monopoles and what is this hydrogen? Break down those two projects specifically.
So the first one obviously is really the big one, and I can't disclose the name. I've said it before. It's a contractual obligation, but there is a contractor that's going to be installing on the eastern seaboard of the United States, multiple wind farms. They're going to be offshore. Those monopoles are going to be coming from Germany, offloaded, and stored on our runways.
So these are basically the base of a turbine.
Yeah, they're the base of the turbine. They're about 2,800 tons each, 120 meters long, 10 meters high. They're just absolute monsters.
And how many of those could fit on a ship?
Four.
Only four?
Only four.
Okay, so coming from Europe, 4 at a time.
They'll offload them with Mammoth.
Okay.
Mammoth will offload them. They'll transport them on what they call the SPMT, move it up to the runway, lay it on the berms, which I'll show you later today. You'll get a real visualization.
Yeah.
She'll go in, she'll lower herself down and lay the monopile on the berm. And she'll continually do that, hopefully for many, many years to come, as projects keep going and coming. And so
and they sit there until they're ready to go
in the construction season. So
okay.
the first ones arrive next June, or this June, June of 23. The first ones start to arrive. In June of 24, in that construction season, same as our Newfoundland offshore oil and gas, the construction season always June or September.
Yeah.
Get away from hurricanes.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen here. So she's going to start shuttling back and forth. There's upwards of maybe 3 or 4 vessels that will do that shuttling.
Okay.
And bring them to the site to be installed. So then that's that piece. We are North America's first and only U.S. offshore wind marshalling port.
Okay.
For these structures. There's nowhere else that does it. Now we're coming in and we're saying, okay, now we've got to build our own 40 or 50 wind turbines. So we're working very closely with Pattern Energy, by the Canadian Pension Fund, one of the world's leading wind producers or energy producers through wind. And they're going to be coming with their vessels and their suppliers, whether it be a Siemens or a Vestas or whomever.
Right.
And they're going to be coming alongside and saying, oh yeah, we've got 50 or 60 wind turbines that we need to offload, and they're props. These are not small structures.
No.
So we've got to offload them, we've got to take them to a storage area, they'll be inspected, and then roads got to be built up through what we call our backlands for them to be erected. So that's the two different, when there's a monopile, it's just a strictly dumb steel that's going to go to the seabed and will be the base of the turbine. That'll be offshore. And then there's ours, which is our land-based wind turbines that you'd see around some of the provinces in Atlantic Canada, etc.
And then you take that wind and you convert it into hydrogen, the electrolyzer right here on the site?
Right here on site. That is the plan. That is the proposal. That is the project.
Into hydrogen, and hydrogen off to wherever?
Onto a boat. And
to a customer, whomever.
In Germany, Europe, Belgium. Right. Funny, this Thursday I'm in Halifax, and I'm presenting to the Belgian ambassador to Canada. I forget his name, but I will be presenting to him and a group of delegates about our opportunities here at the port and how Belgium wants to form some type of an affiliation with.
It's amazing. You're business development for the province, really, aren't you? It's part of your role.
Well, it is, and I've often said this. I've spoken to the other ports.
Yeah.
I've spoken to the port in Botwood. I've spoken to the port in Stephenville. I've spoken to the port in Cornerbrook. And my message has always been to them, continually show what you're good at.
Yeah.
And you can shape that any way you wish. Right? Sometimes you got to shape it in a way that is more makes your client more attentive. But I've always said to them, if there's something that we can do to help bring something into Newfoundland, we will. And an ideal example of that is if other developers were coming to us and we never had any line of sight of capacity to use them, I can, as a proud Newfoundlander, I can guarantee you that I would be talking to the folks at the Port of Botwood, which I have. I've spoken to Jackie in Cornerbrook. I've spoken to the gentleman over in Stephenville, and I've given them the concept.
Yeah.
And there are reasons why some of these ports don't suit for what we're doing, but it could be anything coming here. And if we don't have capacity to do it, then I absolutely will. So it is somewhat of a business development for the province, and if that's being driven by the international world of what the port is doing, then more power to us. I think it's a win-win.
Scott, we're looking at a beautiful horizon here out the window right now, but if you were to look at 5, 10, 15-year horizons for the Port of Argentia and this part of Newfoundland, and I would even argue Newfoundland broadly, what do you see it looking like?
No question. I think the province's future is extremely bright. I think, the news of, Equinor, getting close to 1 billion barrels, West White Rose is coming online, the FPSO is back online. So our traditional coffers will be filled that way. But now you go and you look at it and you have these major wind developers. This is nothing new. This is happening all around the world. And they've come and they've descended onto Newfoundland and Atlantic Canada. And so it's our job to open them with open arms, make sure that there's a fair agreement and it works. But if you think about it, they're coming in, they're not looking for public money. They're coming in to invest in the province. Yeah. So now you've got two major industries with a unique demand from a hydrogen and that whole social challenge that we face worldwide today. You can really see a future where, like, as far as I'm concerned, sky's the limit. We're just one port. I think there's many locations around the province that can, those companies can invest in wind. Do I see an area or a province in the next 10 years with 15 electrolyzer facilities and plants on them? No. I think the province is going to be, one or two facilities, maybe one on the west, one on the east coast, and those ports will feed in. All the wind projects can feed in, and we can export. And the royalties, and the province can get royalties on Crown land. There's land that would never be walked upon that could be suitable for a turbine. And so when you factor all that into it, everything coming online at one time, the next 5 years here is going to be just absolutely bananas, business-wise, from the U.S. project to our own, to the potential for the spool base, West White Rose cluing up, aquaculture is another one that's going to have a play here. If you think about it, that conversion, ammonia to hydrogen, the output, one of the main outputs is warm water.
Yep.
So warm water, aquaculture, land-based.
Scott, are there any estimates on the type of full-time equivalent jobs that are going to be generated over the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, so I know that there's been a lot of discussion around, and some of these numbers are all project-based. So I know that, as an example, the one with Pattern, they're talking in excess of 1,200 during project.
1,200?
1,200 project during the project. that obviously will ramp down. You'll probably be about maybe somewhere between 50 to 75 full-time, highly skilled technical jobs working. Then you got, your and that would be also for your turbine technicians and things that they're going to go up and climb. I won't be applying on those jobs, I can guarantee it. So there's so much spin-off in this area, and that's one of the big challenges. And the mayor and I have talked about it many times, and he probably did touch on it in his interview, that it's so important not to forget the vulnerable people in society.
He did. He touched on that.
Right? Because, and we talk about it every week. He'll call and we'll have a chat. And it's so important for us as a port that we not do that, right?
Right.
And so, we've talked to some of these major world international partners about, how can we collaborate, on affordable housing, etc. Because they will get lost, and we have to make sure that we don't lose them. And there's a lot of prosperity going to descend on this part of the province.
Right.
And while it's big and it's beautiful, it can get really cramped, pressure, a lot of pressure, financial, social impacts, health care. It really can get overwhelming.
Yeah.
And like I said, in the next 3 to 5 years between Pattern, the US, West White Rose, aquaculture, and the list goes on, we have to be ready for that. And so there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, the mayor did talk about it, Scott. And but what struck me in his conversation and in yours is that you found the balance between social responsibility and this incredible opportunity in front of you. You're already incorporating it into the thought process. That's the recipe for success.
Well, and I'll give you an example. I mean, this winter alone, and we were looking at ways of, we've seen what's coming our way, so we can see a trajectory to prosperity for this area. We see it, and one of the small things that we always talk, what can we do to give back and do something? So we got together the port, Boscalis, and the port, Boscalis, and Pattern, and we all got together and we donated $5,000 each. $15,000 donation to the Community Food Bank. So probably one of their biggest donations that they had gotten. So it made a big difference. That's only one piece of it, and we haven't got anything started here yet, right? So maybe over the next couple of years, that becomes $15,000 from each entity.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you support that, and you grow. But the main point is not the value of what was donated. The main point is that the stakeholders, me, the board, and our entire management team and our staff acknowledge we have to start somewhere. So the precedent is set, and I'm hoping that next year we'll be donating double that amount.
Right.
And that's so important for us because hopefully some of these people will be able to come to work with us.
Yeah.
And we work very closely, and we believe in giving back to the community. We've done some stuff with the local Lions Manor here in Placentia. We've done it with the schools. We continue to do things. It's so important to give back.
Yeah, you've got to be certainly integrated with the community's vision and everything. And it's clear that you must come to work every day, and this must be like a blank canvas, an artist looking at what can I paint today. There just seems to be an abundance.
Well, I don't know if you want to see me painting, Al, but I mean, I'm not a good painter. But it's about vision.
Yeah.
And sometimes Chris, the general manager, or Ray, our marketing and business development manager, they have to ground me sometimes because I can get a bit overwhelming, I'm sure. But we've been able to look at our total layout of this land mass and look at ways that we can make sure that these projects can cohabitate together. So as I said, if you go down on one part of the peninsula, you go right to the very end, you've got $1 billion mega project constructing for the offshore oil and gas. Then you turn a little bit to your left, and you're looking at a 70-hectare runway where you're going to have U.S. offshore wind monopiles. Then you make another little turn, and you see a runway that runs straight down into a back of what we call Cooper Cove. And that's potential for a spool base for Beta Nord. Then you go over a little bit further, and you're into a location that is very attractive to aquaculture, given the proximity and closeness. And then I haven't even touched on, so all of this demand is creating a huge pressure on our dock infrastructure.
Right.
So we've made application to the National Trade Corridor Fund to look for a dock extension. We feel that we've got a very compelling story because we're going to be able to, export and import when it comes to the U.S. monopiles. We want to do more and more of that. The spool base is going to need a facility. And when I take you down, I'll show you exactly. There's a trajectory right from that runway leading right to the back of a spool vessel. So all of these pieces together, you're right. There's a blank canvas. You've always got to be thinking. We're in discussions with a couple of major U.S. offshore wind developers that need land and laydown. And I can tell you now our team is looking at ways in which how can we accommodate.
Yeah.
And we can accommodate. If we get more of an investment from that corridor fund, we'll be able to take more U.S. offshore wind monopiles and store them in other locations on the port lands. Amazing. So that's what we're trying to do. So you're exactly right. It is a blank canvas. But I always say to myself when I drive around, and I really mean this, I would love to have come back here in the 60s and drive through it and see the housing and see the hockey rink, the baseball fields, the boats. The harbor was full of boats. So, even though, I don't want to lose the history of the place, but we're going to take full advantage of what a tremendous asset was left to us.
I got a feeling the 60s will return here in that vibrance, but they probably won't be diesel boats. They might be hydrogen.
Well, and so as part of our, again, and that's important because, for us, and I said this to the Premier, and I've said this to Minister O'Regan, we are really trying to lead the transition, right? So when we talk about, Beta Nord, and there are naysayers that say we don't need to be on oil and gas, and I don't agree with that. I think there is a transition. So if you think about it, if we could run a spool-based facility for the offshore oil and gas off of our wind investment here with Pattern Energy, that's as green as it gets.
As green as it gets, yeah.
If you are the main port to feed the U.S. offshore wind market, you're leading the transition. 100%. You have a critical piece of that supply chain. Yeah. And if you're investing to put turbines on your own property, you're leading the charge. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And, that's the goal. There is a transition, and you can either wait or you can get out in front of it. And our team has taken the approach to let's get out in front of it. And I think we've been very successful. And I think it's going to continue to be more and more accepted, because I think the next phase of all of this is we need to get to port electrification. So as part of our corridor fund application, we really believe that we can be the first port in the province to be electrified. So when you get that big black smoke diesel vessel pulling up alongside, and you don't want to look at that, you could say shut off your engines and plug in.
Right.
That's where we want to be.
Yeah.
And that's very important to us. So we see that. The hybrid cranes, we see that. And so, there's so many opportunities for this port. And it all goes back to the larger team and the board of directors buying into, a plan of which is, let's get out in front of the transition. Let's ride the wave of the transition and lead it. And by doing so, illustrate to the province, to the country, to the world, that the Port of Argentia is spearheading this and are taking the steps needed to do it.
Scott, I mean, you're clearly traveling around the bazaars globally, talking about this this incredible opportunity you have for folks. What's your pitch to people? What does that look like? What do you talk about when you're summarizing Argentia in that elevator?
Well, I can tell
what are you saying?
Well, I can tell you the pitch was very different after we signed our contract for the U.S. offshore.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like everything. You're knocking on a door. Like I go back to the entrepreneur, trying to sell that widget. But once you get the big contract in a Costco, then you're relevant.
Yeah.
And I can tell you the first few trips were like,
who's this guy?
Who's this fella?
Who's this guy, right?
Yeah.
But once word got out, we had publications calling us, doing interviews worldwide, offshore wind magazines.
Yeah.
That we weren't paying for. We were being. We've heard that you're a special port.
Right.
And so traveling the world. I mean, last year I was in Spain, Spent a lot of time down in the US. And it's all about trying to find the next opportunity.
Yeah.
And I believe that we've got a great location. We've spoken to a couple of major developers that are really keen on this port. And the timing of everything, I think, will allow us to do one of those. And if we can do one more of those, we'll be set, I think, for many, many years to come. And that's what it's about, is just continually tell the story. Well, what is the Port of Argentia?
Yeah.
Right? But I can tell you, when I went to Boston in June, they were looking for the Port of Argentia. They were coming to the
Right.
Canada booth.
Yeah.
Is there a Port of Argentia? Are they here? Yes.
Yeah.
And then you'd have your discussions. So how much land do you have?
Yeah.
Hectares, 1,200 hectares. Like, they're like, okay.
Yeah.
And what, do you have ice? No, we have no ice. And it just rolls off the tongue, and they look at it, and they very quickly get that somebody else has signed a contract in Argentia
Yeah.
for this massive, massive opportunity, then it can work for us.
You got all of that situated, surrounded by a wonderful community, situated in a wonderful province,
Yep.
in a wonderful country. I mean, this is an incredible thing to be offering the globe.
Right. And again, I'll say it. I mean, the Premier visited here a couple of weeks ago, one of the things I did say to the Premier is that it's important for the province and under your leadership to invest in areas where economic development is striving.
Yeah.
And it's the old saying, I don't want a hand down, I want a hand up.
Yeah.
We want to be in a position that if all this development is coming, we need to be able to be ready.
Mm-hmm.
So that when these large company international executives come to Argentia, they drive on a good road,
Yeah.
a well-lit road, a well-snowed, clear road that's safe.
Yeah.
And the infrastructure is there to support the next 5 years. Because if it's not, you very quickly get an X for your ability to perform. And as a province, you've got as I said earlier, you've got everybody descending. Premier, so let's work together. And he's been very supportive of the port, the area as a whole, and I can't say enough. So when you say you're going out and you're promoting the province, yeah, I am absolutely promoting the province, not only the Port of Argentia.
What do you think, Jerry?
Well, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Ray. Ray's off on the sidelines there. Just bringing us here, we've got a snapshot, Alan. We haven't been able to talk to everyone, Scott.
Right.
I missed the board chair. Hopefully we get him. There's so many people that are doing great things here, Alan, and I'm just uplifted, and that's why we're here. We want to showcase that because the province needs more of what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. And we believe, look, at the end of the day, one of the real things that's been driven by the board of directors here and by our community is that ongoing consultation.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't have consultation and you don't tell your stakeholders, and your stakeholders are your community.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't share that, then you're only asking for trouble.
Yeah.
And we've been very open. I mean, we've had presentations with Boscalis we got to take out Boscalis, but we have shared the information they've presented to our council. We continue to do that, and even with Pattern Energy, like consultation. It's so important. Anytime, no matter what you're doing, this port belongs to the people of this region.
Right.
And if you're not a good steward of it, then you're going to have trouble. So we've always been very proactive to try to really make sure that everybody knows what's going on. We're putting turbines up. The resistance has been zero. There may be some that will have some issue with it, but really and truly, this is purely an industrial site,
Mm-hmm.
one of which is like no other in the province.
Yeah.
And so we're going to maximize the potential that's here, but at the same time be very cognizant of our stakeholders and our community to ensure that they fully understand that some guy's not coming in from out of town and messing up what we got, because it's so important to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Not everybody will be on the same page, but everybody got the same information.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's very important.
Scott, thanks very much. A really good understanding of what's going on out here, and certainly, to use your words, the future is very bright
Right.
for this province, very bright for the Port of Argentia.
Right.
There's somebody down in the U.S. Department of Treasury calling over the Pennecon right now saying, how much did we sell that for? We'd like to renegotiate that deal. It really is quite something here, and I think we're sitting right now on the cusp of something that 10, 15 years from now, we'll be looking back and saying, wow, we were there in conversation at the beginning when all of this was happening. What an exciting place. Congratulations, good for you. And all of this doesn't happen without solid leadership, so you're good to be commended for that.
Thank you. And I certainly would not be a good leader if you don't have a good team. Yeah. And my team has been very committed, very loyal. The board of directors, while definitely, you know, like everybody's got a boss, and you got to make sure that you got all your ducks in a row. And they've been very diligent to understand exactly what's going on, and they're engaged. And sometimes you have boards that are not engaged. I can tell you the board here is engaged, the community is engaged, and more importantly, the staff, the outside workers, and the management team, everybody's engaged and pulling on that oar. So it's an exciting time, no question.
Another great edition, GaleForceWins, right here in the Port of Argentia. Thanks very much.
Thank you for tuning in to GaleForceWins. That's GaleForceWins, WINS.com.